Why is it important to focus on the elimination of violence against women and girls? According to the UN Women, violence against women and girls continue to plague our society. It has widespread, persistent, and devastating effects on women and girls throughout the world. The UN General Assembly defines domestic violence against a woman as any act of gender-based violence which results in or has the likelihood of resulting in any physical, sexual, or psychological harm to a woman. This includes threats, acts of coercion, deprivation of liberty, whether it occurs in private or public. It is therefore important for us as a society and the world to acknowledge the devastating effects that domestic violence can have on our women. In Trinidad and Tobago, we had developed a national strategic gender-based violence action plan, which seeks to address domestic violence in all forms. And while we acknowledge that domestic violence does not affect only women, the statistics state that 44% of any ever partnered woman experienced intimate partner violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is currently higher than the global rate of 1 in 3 women and girls who experience this form of violence. Alarmingly as well, 92% of these reports of domestic violence occur from women and girls who are victims of sexual violence, and they are all under the age of 35 years. Violence against women, therefore, continue to be an obstacle in achieving the equality, development, and peace, as well as the sustainable fulfillment of women and girls' human rights. It is therefore very important for us as a world and society to understand the importance of eliminating violence against women and girls. What are the international obligations of Trinidad and Tobago when dealing with the elimination of violence against women? Trinidad and Tobago has ratified a number of international instruments which deal with the elimination of violence against women. Of most importance, the Inter-American Commission on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, also the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, are just some of the pieces of international instruments which are very important in the eradication of violence against women. These pieces of legislation, along with certain international commitments as outlined in the UN General Assembly on the Declaration of Elimination of Violence Against Women, as well as the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, play an important part in the protection of violence against women and girls, which have in fact been incorporated in some of the laws in Trinidad and Tobago. Some of these laws include the Domestic Violence Act as amended, Sexual Offences Act as amended, the Trafficking in Persons Act, and also we've developed certain national policies which aim to focus on the elimination of violence against women and also to focus on understanding that there is a need in our society to eradicate this devastating human rights violation. What is the piece of legislation which deals with domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago? In Trinidad and Tobago, the Domestic Violence Act of 1999 was recently amended. This amendment allowed for urgent and emergency protection orders to be granted. In this case, not only a victim of domestic violence can bring an application or apply to the court for an application for protection order, but a senior superintendent in the police, along with other persons, can in fact move the court to hear an application for protection order for a victim who is not able to appear. In Trinidad and Tobago, the legislation has also gone further to allow for compensation to victims and also to permit a protection order past a 3-year period if, in the eyes of the court, it is important to ensure that a woman's safety and that of an applicant is secured. The Act also permits the payment of rent, mortgages, or otherwise for an individual who has been a victim of domestic violence. It also goes further to indicate that a child who has crossed the age of 16 years can in fact apply for protection order on their own accord. In light of all of these developments that the court and the legislators have in fact implemented, we are now sitting in the family court able to address domestic violence as it is in fact plaguing our society. The judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago has also gone further to establish certain specialized courts which deal with domestic violence. These courts allow for separate entrances for victims and perpetrators. It allows also for evidence to be taken without the victim having sight of the perpetrator in the court. In this way, it is our hope that more persons who experience domestic violence come before the court to ensure and secure their protection. Their protection is necessary as it's needed to secure their own basic human rights. Another important development with the amendments made to the Domestic Violence Act speaks to those persons who can apply arising out of a dating relationship. And our act now defines a dating relationship as any relationship, whether or not you're living together, where there's a sexual relation, an intimate relationship between persons. This type of relationship does not specify whether it can be same-sex or man and woman relationship. We therefore see the law developing to allow for protection of persons, whether you be in a same-sex relationship or whether you are in a heterosexual relationship. This important development has allowed for those persons in a dating relationship to be classified as in a domestic relationship, therefore permitting them to apply for protection order under the new piece of legislation.